Hey everybody, welcome to the studio and happy hump day or whatever day it may be when you stumble across it, assuming one person ever stumbles across one of my videos that I do. Check out CariniArts.com for much more. You can also join me on my other platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm really trying to grow this. So if you like these, if you find these helpful, please share them, tell people about me, help me grow, and give me a reason to keep coming back to do this aside from to talk to myself. But today I wanted to talk about how to manage, and I feel like this is an issue that pretty much everyone across at some point during their tenure. And I have, through my own experience and also through teaching, I taught paint and sip classes for a while, and I have seen people just absolutely beat the high holy shit out of their brushes in terms of how they care for them. So there's some really simple steps that are preventative to avoid so much hassle, will save you a lot of money. And then there are some quick tips for repairing and restoring damaged brushes as well that I want to share with you. That after I tell you, you're going to be like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? It makes so much sense, assuming that you didn't already know these already. So first and foremost, I got a couple of the brushes that I love using here. So one of the things that I do is when I finally find a brush or brushes that I like, I buy them in multiples. So I have several of this exact brush, several of this, several of this. And some of these get to be very pricey. Like this is a Da Vinci brush. It kind of looks like it's not all nice right here, but what you're seeing, plastic came off, and that's just cosmetic stuff. Like I don't care what a brush looks like. If it performs and functions, that's what's the most important thing to me, rather than how it looks on the outside. So this brush works perfectly fine, and I have brought this thing back to life several times. I've had this one for a couple years, and I use it for varnishing and some very fine work. This I use for a lot of my detail work, intricate stuff. So sometimes it starts to get a little frayed, but I can take certain steps to avoid that happening. Now, this is a gesso brush, and I also use this for a lot of my underpaintings, a lot of my base coats and aggressive work. So because of the techniques that are used for that, I tend to beat the crap out of this brush. So this is one that I have to replace a little more frequently, but there's certain things that I do that make it last as long as reasonably possible. Now, there are alternatives to this. Like you could always try to get cheaper brushes. There are what's called chip brushes that are kind of like this, but they're not as thick. And a lot of times the hairs will come out. And I just hate dealing with that. So I find that if you get nicer brushes and you take care of them, they will pay for themselves as opposed to sometimes getting the cheaper brushes, unless you know it's going to be a technique that it's a throwaway brush or something you're just going to beat the crap out of. But first and foremost, when you're using your brush, and I would always teach this during the paint and sip classes, although people were doing a little sipping beforehand, so I don't know that it ever really registered. But when you're using your brush, you got paint on it. As long as you, when you're done using it, you stick it in the water and you dab it a number of times and get most of the paint off, you can avoid 75% of the issues that you could potentially have. You're keeping that brush relatively clean, even if it's sitting in water that has paint in it. As long as there's not chunks of paint on it, you're fine. Now, sometimes I'm guilty of just kind of putting it in there and like pressing down and not really doing enough. So I am being more conscious of that as I move forward, as I find myself falling into bad habits. But I always make sure that when I'm done using it, that I'll stick it in there and I will dab it off. Now, sometimes maybe you're working with a couple brushes simultaneously, or you're working with a technique that requires you to quickly jump into something and you completely forget that you set something aside. So that happens, and it's understandable, and that's where some of the care steps that I'm going to be sharing with you are going to come into play. The other step that is super simple that will help you avoid another good chunk of issues is just to avoid getting paint in the ferrule. So this is the ferrule right here, this part of the brush. And generally speaking, when you're painting and you're using whatever technique, there's not really much reason that I can imagine that you need to get the paint up here. Generally, your paint's going to stay down here unless you have your palette here and you like set it right there. There's no reason for the paint to get up into the ferrule, and you can avoid a good chunk of your issues by just not getting the paint in the ferrule. So sticking it in the water, dabbing it, and avoiding the ferrule, you've already avoided a good chunk of the issues that you will run into. Now, let's say that you have, and this happened to me the other day, a brush like this, and maybe you're doing like a varnishing technique. So when I'm done with varnishing, I will wash this brush several times with soap. I will clear it out a number of times. I will use a sponge and kind of pull out any chunks that may be there, or just try to get the bristles a little more thoroughly. And still, this brush will tend to solidify. So sometimes I'll come back to the brush and this thing will be like rock hard, like this was just one piece with zero movement whatsoever. So literally rock hard. And I'll think, oh my God, that thing's done. I've been through this enough that I know that I can bring it back to life. So here's the trick. And I've had people in the industry I'm about to mention be like, I should know this. Why didn't I think of that? Brushes are made out of hair. So whether it's synthetic hair or animal hair, because oftentimes brushes were made with animal hair. I know that we're moving into an age where people are much more animal friendly and like, look, this thing's like falling apart right now, like pieces coming off the brush. But again, just cosmetic. But brushes are made out of hair. So generally speaking, when your hair gets matted up or you get something in your hair, how do you fix it? What do? Shampoo and conditioner. Maybe you need a little spa day or a little trip to the salon. And what does that do? Like it's brand new. A lot of times you walk out feeling fresh, clean, rejuvenated. Well, same goes for your brushes. You just got to think of them as hair. And so when they get damaged, imagine them as like it's your head. What would you do to repair if this was your hair? What would you do to fix this? So shampoo and conditioner will resolve the majority of the issues you have. There are very few issues I have not been able to resolve with shampoo and conditioner. Your hair just needs a little TLC, a little spa day, a little love. So it may take more than one run at it. That you may have to soak your brush a number of times, but when my brush gets solidified or one of them gets frayed, or maybe I have to go do a show or do a live painting event and something gets bent back, like the bristles get frayed, I can oftentimes just shampoo, condition, repeat, maybe let it soak in water for a couple hours, even a day or so if I need to. Sometimes I'll leave the conditioner in and I'll just let it sit for hours. And then when it comes time to dealing with frays and issues with the shape, you can take a wet paper towel. It can be lathered in conditioner, and you can take that wet paper towel. You can wrap your brush in that wet paper towel, and you can reshape it just like that. And then you just let it sit, and that wet paper towel helps to reshape it while it sets. And so again, you may need to be patient with it. You may need to repeat the process and the steps, but I guarantee you will be amazed with how much money you can save and how many brushes you can restore just with these simple tips. So prevention, of course, and maintenance is always the key. So avoid getting paint in the ferrule and make sure that you're cleaning them out constantly. But if anything does get damaged, like maybe you have your kids that play with your brushes and they didn't listen, and you got to repair them, or a friend that uses them, because I don't like to let any friends touch my brushes because, hey, that's my stuff. I like it handled a certain way, and people aren't going to take care of your stuff the way that you're going to take care of it. But if it does get damaged, shampoo, conditioner, wet paper towel, solve almost every one of your issues. So let me know if you've ever tried this, or techniques that you may have that I didn't mention. And let me know if there's any other topics you'd like me to cover in the future, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. See you next time.